these are my friends. Come along with me, see how the story ends.
Welcome back to another episode of Professional Hippies. We missed you guys. Hey, today we have, is it actually a fair statement to say, Dylan, our highest rated, if not the highest, one of our highest rated guests on the show, returning back, Dr. Panzer. How you doing?
What is up, everybody? I'm doing great. Had an awesome, productive day filming some other types of podcasts, but excited to be back on with YouTube and at least for my normal type of audience podcast, be a little, off the beaten path, a little off the deep end a little bit.
We get
I
that
would like it.
exclusive, Man, you've been putting out content though. That's one thing. We caught up a little bit before the show, but I feel like we left like a lot of the juicy details for when we're actually in it and recording it. And by the way, if you guys want to watch this episode, you can tune in on Spotify and watch it there as well as YouTube. But if you find it more convenient, check it out on Spotify. Yeah, so you've been putting out a ton of content. So just kind of, I don't even know where you want to pick up, but fill us in on what you've been up to, brother.
Yeah, so I got laid off from my corporate job on my 30th birthday. So that was actually a blessing in disguise. I started my own holistic genetic health practice. So utilizing people's genetics, figure out exactly what their cells need or they have too much of. And I think it just makes a really good first step for people rather than all this guesswork. What supplements do I take? What foods do I eat? The genes can tell us a lot. So my corporate job, it was more corporate genetics. So more severe genetic defects, cancer, etc. But that never really interested me that much. So around 8 months ago, I started launching my practice on this company called Self the Coach platform. Sort of like 23andMe, but like max the fuck out on steroids. AI is like getting a whole bunch of different algorithms to pull out the right type of data for you. And I'm offering one-on-one deep dive consult to figure out exactly what you need. And more importantly, what supplements, foods you may not need. So many people I see come to me, they're on the wrong types of supplements that are making their health issues worse. And I got laid off on my 30th birthday in November. I worked
On the birthday?
and now I've been full-time. Yeah, on my 30th birthday. Yep. I knew I wanted to leave there. It didn't really satisfy me that much, but it was kind of the push I needed out the door. And I've been doing this full time now for a month, not looking back. The results for my clients have been so astounding, and just realizing, doing more podcasts and stuff, networking, how much my type of services are needed. And, I gotta tip my hat off to you guys. I remember the first episode I came on for Professional Hippies, I didn't even have a doctor Instagram. And Dylon was telling me, you got to make a doctor Instagram. And I'm like, well, I guess you're right. I mean, I'm on a podcast now, so I probably should. So the initial genesis of the Dr. Tyler Panzner, I wouldn't even call it an alter ego. Anyone that knows me knows this is me all the fucking time anyways. But, that distinction between personal and I guess professional, I got to give that initial push, give kudos to that to you guys. So super, super excited with what's going on now. I do one-on-ones now, but I want to do group coaching, group education, especially educating holistic practitioners and honestly regular doctors as well about how these supplements can really fuck people's health up. If you're on the wrong ones based on your genes, a lot of natural supplements can interact with medications. Like, you ever see on the bottles for prescription drugs, it says like, don't have a grapefruit juice.
Mm-hmm.
That's because it prevents the breakdown of other medications. So a lot of other supplements, CBD is one. I love CBD, but CBD affects the breakdown of prescription medications. I've seen people that are
Really
overdosing basically on their depression meds because the CBD is affecting the metabolism of it. CBD suppliers don't know this. Holistic practitioners don't know this. Regular doctors sure as fuck don't know this. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of people harming themselves due to the misuse of these unregulated supplements. And it's like, do you ban the supplements? You need a PhD to use them? I don't think that's the answer either, because we're no better than big pharma. But I do think it's important to educate people. It's one thing to get supplements that don't work for you, do anything, like shitty supplements, but it's even worse. You can have a supplement that's good for your gut health that's giving you a lot of anxiety. So
starting off hot.
I feel like that correlates to a lot of people. They just read what's on the internet and they think, oh, I feel like this, so this supplement should help. But then a week later, they're saying, "Oh, I feel like this now. This supplement should help," and then they just got a whole concoction, chemistry lab,
Yeah.
in their own apartment that they're trying.
I mean, most of my clients literally say like, "Hey, I have 5 grand of supplements in my pantry. I don't know what the fuck is doing what. Please help me." And I'm like, "Yeah, I could have saved you a lot of money if you just worked with me initially. And then you'll save a lot of money in the long run because you're just not buying like, use my code to buy this supplement. It'll work for all this or all of that." And it's like, yeah, I have codes for stuff, but I feel weird doing it a lot of the time. I don't like giving general supplement advice because everybody is different. Everybody. See what I did there? Interesting. But yeah, I just see a lot of people messing themselves up on these things and a lot of people going on meds I don't think they need to be on in the first place.
Man, so have you gotten a lot of now that you're doing this, right? And you're going very independent, you're not being held back by a company. It seems like you might be getting a pushback from companies on what you're doing, right? Like your knowledge on this to be able to go one on one, which I feel like it should be anyways when you're taking supplements. It should be everybody's a little different. Are you getting pushback from anybody or corporations or other people being like, no, like you're telling people wrong things. These supplements do work for people.
So I haven't gotten that yet. I mean, I'm really proud of the growth I've been getting like thus far, but I'm still a little baby in this right now. I'm just getting started. I do anticipate, like I've had some people that are other PhDs around my age that followed me initially and then they unfollow me because they just label me as, a holistic, whatever, just trying to peddle random supplements just to make money on the commissions, this and that. And there's undoubtedly a lot of that in the holistic space. I've been in this bubble pretty intensely for around a year or so. And there definitely is a lot of that, but people just don't understand. They just don't connect the dots the way that I'm able to and realize like if you have mutations, so you need triple the vitamin D of someone else, like then you have someone else telling you, oh, vitamin D can calcify your body makes it, you don't need to supplement with it. I have a mutation, no matter how much sunlight I get, I will never make enough vitamin D. I was in the middle of the summer, tan as hell, I love the beach, super low vitamin D levels. So they're just not aware. Ignorance, and it's just lack of education around it. But I try really hard to not be solely lumped into the holistic space. Like I'm like, that's my home for sure. That context makes a lot of sense. I try to be very vocal that I don't want to be like a carnivore MD or liver king. My thing works for everyone always. Do I think everyone can benefit from personalizing what foods, supplements, vitamins they put in their body? Absolutely. But I'll never be that guy saying, take the pills I tell you to, it'll fix all your problems. Because that's just one part of holistic health. You can feed the cells what they need, but if you're in toxic fucking relationships, horrible mindset, your spirit's not in line with what you're doing day to day, that's going to do damage as well. So it's just one part. I think of one part of the pizza pie, but this slice of the pizza pie, no one's talking about. There's so many holistic nutritionists, mold people, virus people, all these things for the holistic space. I think I know of 2 other holistic coaches that are doing similar things that I'm doing. And they're great, but they come from the holistic coaching side of things. So me coming with a PhD in pharmacology, having a mastery on how cells work and how things affect cells themselves, I get to go in a little bit of a different perspective and uncover some things that might have been missed. So I think it's not everything. It's just very underutilized. And still people I talk to, I step out of my bubble and they're just like, holy shit, this is mind blowing. This makes so much sense. And then it's like, all right, good. I'm on the right path. Once you step out, sometimes you got to step out of your bubble a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And when you're doing this as well, when you're talking with people and get them on their own supplements, does the conversation ever come up? A lot of this could also depend just on where you're living and your location. Like someone in California could have a whole different scenario and problem, and what could fix them could be different than what someone living in Austin, Texas has. I feel like air quality and a whole bunch of other things people don't think about where they're at and whatever their food products they're eating. Like a tomato or an apple in Austin could be a completely different apple in California, but they think it's the same.
No, I mean, that's a really good point. I actually was at this conference in Austin the other week. Should have hit up Colton, but I did.
Shoulda.
Water under the bridge at this point. But this one guy studied nitric oxide, and that's what helps dilate blood vessels. It's really important for health and vitality, anti-aging. and there was a study that showed different produces in different areas across the country. New York was dead fucking last for like every type of food. It was like dead last by a lot. And even whether it's organic or not. And I'm like, oh, well, fucking awesome. So that's a really good point you bring up. And that's something that I've been trying to learn more about is clearly I come from the genetics supplement side, take these pills, but I'm learning a lot more about air quality. Mold toxicity is really huge. I see in a lot of people. Viruses or parasites as well. And that depends on, how close are you to livestock, where there could be animals bringing in those types of parasites from livestock. What's the mold situation like? What's the humidity? Mold can only grow in certain types of humidity levels. And then the air pollution, like you said. I mean, did you guys hear about the chemical spill that happened in Ohio?
Dude, I've really been
Yeah,
wanting to get your
that
take
was
on that.
big.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to spread like throughout the world. It's going to slowly diffuse everywhere. And I put up a story rant like last night and how I look at it from the genetic side. The genes that detoxify that stuff, it's really interesting and kind of fucked up that some of the mutations in that gene, like a lot of gene mutations can make it work half as good or 20% as good or 80%. These genes that break this down, they can just like be like not even expressed in your cells at all. So you just have no real way to break it down. It's like, I'm really wondering if you were to sequence people, everyone that went to the hospital with really bad poisoning from these things, what matters more? They both matter, both of these variables, but distance from the spill site versus genetics. So someone that's 10 miles from the site that doesn't have mutations, would they be more or less like sick than someone that's 100 miles away that has the mutations that make them poor metabolizers? It's kind of like, it's really hard to figure out what really matters more. Obviously, our world is getting more toxic, without a doubt. But I also think a lot of these people then are very, very sick from heavy metals or mold. I think most of them have these mutations. So it's like our genes have been programmed the same for the past couple 100,000 years. Like our DNA is the same pretty much that it was. Our cells aren't equipped to deal with the toxins of today, but certain people are more sensitive to them. And I think those are the people that get sicker. And ironically, they end up getting failed. Every doctor fails them and they end up in the holistic space. So I'll work with people, like there'll be a mutation, let's say that 20% of the population has, based on overall like global databases, 20% people, but like 75% of my clients have it. I think that's because I'm artificially selecting for people that have tried everything else and nothing's working. Why is nothing working? Because their cells are mutated at the genetic level. So it's really interesting. Like holistic people are very critical. They're very aware, very good critical thinkers, and honestly, very sick overall. And I don't think it's a coincidence. You would not be searching out and DMing a holistic genetic health optimization scientist. Just like, oh, I don't feel good. Let me just give this a shot. It's going to be like, holy shit, please fucking save me. And that's what a lot of people come to me with.
Where do you put, because you keep returning to the holistic term, like, so where would you put someone being holistic, say like,
Yeah.
hey, just conscious about their health versus them being conscious, woke about their health? Because a lot of times I find those terms being interchangeable.
Interesting. So how would you describe the difference between the two?
A fair question. So like the other night I was having dinner with a friend of mine from out of town. And one of the things I brought up, I was like, why do you think it is that people are involved in Reiki or energy work, so to speak, often are plant based? And his explanation was like an energy based kind of explanation, having done work in that field. And he's like, just feels sticky, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas someone that would be more holistically rounded would potentially take a different approach, whether that's more of like looking at, hey, this is really the sustenance that you're gaining from animal-based products and plant-based products versus just like leaning right straight into plants and saying like overarching energy-based, like wokeness. This is so that's kind of where I'm splitting the horizon.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, the lines are definitely blurred to some degree, but I do think that I think a lot of people are also very scared and hypochondriacs about things. And then they latch onto things. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people latch onto certain things and base their identity around those things. So I also think, though, I think there's certain genetics that the things that make you very sensitive to, people that are sensitive to Wi-Fi or EMFs or people that are very sensitive nervous systems, I think are also on average more spiritual, more open-minded to these things because I think they are able to pick up on certain types of frequencies. I have this really interesting theory I'm sure you guys would love. So psychedelics, psilocybin, mescaline, DMT, they all bind the serotonin 2A receptor. That's what makes you trip. That's what gives you the visuals. That's what grows the brain cells. It has all these profound effects on consciousness. You can have mutations in that specific serotonin receptor. So your serotonin levels could be normal, but that specific receptor isn't as sensitive to serotonin. So you give someone an SSRI, you increase overall serotonin. You'll be stimulating that one receptor more, but then you'll be overstimulating the other ones. So a lot of side effects. Versus psychedelics, microdosing, whatever, you just can be like the puzzle piece and fix that one specific receptor. Now, I also believe, based on people that I've worked with, some people that are into energy healing, some of them do angel readings, etc. I think there can also be mutations that make that receptor hyper responsive. So imagine rather than giving someone a psychedelic, it helps with their depression, it brings it up to where it should be. Imagine having always excessive firing of that psychedelic receptor. And I think we're all in the same camp here that yeah, sure, sometimes the trips are just hallucination. I think we can all agree a significant portion of them are actually some sort of extrasensory intuition into something. It's just like the psychedelics lifting the veil there. And I have this theory that people that are able to, like a lot of these shamans in the villages that are able to do these guided trips and stuff, I think they can have mutations. Basically, they're kind of microdosing on their own serotonin, if that makes sense. Like they have a little more intuition, and veal is always very slightly lifted a little bit, let alone if you actually take a psychedelic, you're going to be a hyper responder. I mean, I've tripped with some people that take half the dose. I do like an eighth of mushrooms, normal good trip. And then some of them take 1.5 grams and they look like they took fucking 10 grams of mushrooms, like completely fucking blasted. And I'm sure it's more than just this one gene, but that one specifically, I think, is very interesting because not only would you be a hyper responder to the trips, probably more likely to see God and these divine things, intuition to whatever, the ether, whatever the fuck you want to call it. I think you'd also have this greater awareness for things soberly when you're not on these. Because that receptor is always very sensitive to the serotonin.
Man, that's interesting. The fact that connect, who has that gene connect a lot better. What that study would look like, let's say down in South America, where you have a lot of shamans, what that would look like if those shamans are the ones specifically with those genes where others might not have it. Because a lot of times you find it's family oriented that the shamans run in. And so that gene keeps getting handed down through the family.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
And this is not even remotely, none of this is remotely based like in the science, right? This is literally just complete theory, hypothesis, but I have seen some, so I would see mutate a certain some number value for like what that exact mutation is. And I have seen some of these people in these lines of work have that same mutation. The lack of knowledge is we know that the receptor can be mutated in that area. We have no idea what it does. There's been no studies on it. All we know is that it can either be this letter or that letter. And I've seen people that are kind of more on that spiritual, whatever you may call it, have more of one letter versus the other, but we really don't know what that means. And again, this is only talking with maybe 5 to 7 people. So, you can never make an actual grandiose claim about it, but this is what I fucking love. I call it in the trenches, like genetic detective work, just connecting these dots. Will anyone ever fund that? I don't fucking know, but like really fucking interesting.
Well, it's like kind of to go in the opposite direction with that a little bit with cannabis. There's the rare instances where some people, it's been found where it was someone that might smoke cannabis for the first time and they do a large dose for whatever reason, unlocks, I think it's schizophrenia.
Yeah.
They'll just unlock it. I wonder if that's kind of the same effect, like of a gene that they have, and it just needs something to trigger it to unlock. And doing a large amount the first time instead of into it unlocks. Same way with the shaman, I guess, route.
Yeah, absolutely. And even growing the cannabis too, you can have mutations in that same cannabinoid receptor that makes it hyper responsive. So you can have someone that has no tolerance, hyper responsive, also possibly with some underlying mental, unprovoked mental things going on. And back to that serotonin 2A receptor, interesting too is like most people know you really don't want to try tripping if you're severely sleep. And if improving sleep deprivation actually increases the amount of that serotonin receptor on your brain. So sleep deprivation brings more receptors that bind the psychedelics. So like the sleep deprivation can increase your sensitivity to these things. Obviously, there's other bad things like just, sleep deprivation is a wild drug. Anyone that's tried that shit before, that shit can be fucking crazy, you know?
It
But
is crazy.
I just love mapping the dynamics with these types of things and connecting it in these contexts. It just seems so fascinating to me applying the deep conventional science with, I guess the holistic spiritual wisdom, all this. And it's all interconnected in some way. I believe in science fully, but I also fully believe whether you want to call it vibes, frequencies, chakras, whatever, when you can just feel someone's energy in the room, even though you don't smell anything from them yet. There's nothing like that yet. Like I could feel my wife walks in the door. I could just hear the door open. Oh my gosh, she's pissed about something. Or, oh, you can just feel that from people. Some people are a lot more in tune with that, but like the best of both worlds.
I think there's something to be said for what science brings to the table and being able to like disseminate when someone is kind of just putting themselves in a thought camp versus like I think it'd be really interesting to see a funded study about what's going on with those receptors to people that might be highly sensitive to an altered state of consciousness versus those that could
Yep.
be just self-selecting, environmentally altering their perception of who they are and what's taking place because of those around them. And when you have a large enough sample size, science can actually bring some data to the table, right? So I think there's like a really happy medium that exists between these two worlds that I think is starting to come out now, just through the spread of information.
Yeah. And I'm even thinking this back to the stoned ape theory too. Now, who would benefit best from the stoned ape theory? The monkeys that had a hyperactive receptor or a less active receptor? Probably the ones that tripped harder because they'd have more of that signaling to grow their brain more versus someone that had the opposite receptor. But there's studies proving this. The first mutation I mentioned that makes it less sensitive, that's been proven in science. I mean, it's somewhat preliminary, but like the way I work is using all natural things. I don't need to wait for 5,000 clinical trials to prove, without a shadow of a doubt. I could say, here, I think this might work. $25 bottle, try it out. Worst case scenario, it doesn't do anything to you. You're a little anxious for a day, you don't sleep for a night, or you're a little nauseous. What do you do? You wasted $25 when people are used to spending 30 grand a month on functional lab testing. That's why I love I can be more, at the end of the day, I'm a scientist and be more exploratory with it. And then obviously they're highly educated guesses, but what I consider sufficient evidence versus like a medical doctor is very, very different. But again, I'm utilizing natural things, don't have these crazy addiction profiles. So you can be a lot more risky is not even the word. I guess exploratory with it.
When you're doing this, right, and you're going to look at these studies to find out from people what their genes that they have in order to come up with the best outcome for them. It sounds like almost like I try to do a yearly blood test, right? Where I go, hey, where's things at? Let's see where I need up or lower in things. Would this be something that you would do on a yearly basis to discover, like, to help your clients out? Like, hey, let's
No,
do a
so
gene
the
test,
great
or
part
is it
about
like one
this,
time?
yeah, the also part about this is from the second sperm meets egg until the day you die, all these genes are locked in. They will never ever change. So this is a one and done type test. Now, my platform gets information on 100 million different mutations. We don't know anything about the vast majority. So even though all the data you could ever want is there, all the data is there, as years go by, they're updating new reports. Hey, now we know what this does. Hey, now we know what that does. So while you may want to get every couple of years Like I've only been doing this for less than a year. I can't wait to see what we're like in 5 years. So then maybe like, oh, maybe we'll do another follow-up in 5 years and see where the new data's at, what more we can do. But regarding the actual testing itself, that's a one and done type of thing. And that's why I think it makes so much sense to start with this because A, it's one and done. B, you're never not going to get answers. Everyone has mutations versus all these guts tests, poop tests, blood tests. You can do all of these and still not be checking for something. Everyone has mutations. So I like how black and white it is. Now, can fixing these solely fix everything? No, of course not. But some people are literally, they say they're cured within 3 days with the supplements because they were primarily genetic. Some people may also have a mold infection or, a lot of childhood trauma, and the supplements help, maybe 20, 30% in a month. And then they start to plateau. And then I have to sadly say, listen, I did everything on my front and I used to beat myself up about that. Oh, I only got them 30%. But then I realized some of these people are still crying to me on the Zoom call. Oh my God, thank you so much. Don't feel bad. Cause they're so grateful for that 30%. Cause they saw, I don't even know how many other doctors before me that didn't do jack shit. And thousands, I've worked with so many people that are literally working just to fund their tests, their medications, their $1,000 a month supplements. And I'm here to say, if you find the ones that your body actually craves, you only need, 5 to maybe 8 different isolated things throughout the day. You don't need these 30, 40 supplements. The more you have, the more likely they are to interact together with each other.
I think that's important too, that a lot of people think that these supplements, they can just keep taking them. They don't realize it's like anything else. You plateau on it.
Well, I fucked my liver up. I remember I had really dark bags under my eyes and I had a lot of symptoms of liver stress because we're not just eating herbs now. Now it's, 50x, 50 to 1 liposomal, mumbo jumbo curcumin. It's all these hyper concentrated, modified versions of natural things. So at what point is that a drug? I consider all these things drugs. If you ask me, anything that interacts with the human body, to me is considered a drug. And like the one example I always love to give people is, you guys heard of curcumin or turmeric? So that's used a lot for inflammation. People use a lot for joint pain, gut health, brain health. And it is a very powerful anti-inflammatory. I used to use it a lot. It also chelates minerals out of your body. So it also lowers iron. I've had women come to me with their hair falling out. My iron's so low, I have no idea what's going on. This naturopath thinks that it's this crazy gut microbe eating all the iron, which can actually happen. But they want me to do this, $4,000 thing or whatever. And I look, they're on the crazy mumbo jumbo, liposomal, double doozy, extra strength curcumin. And they're literally drinking iron liquid, iron supplements to try to get their iron up every day. And they're having curcumin with it. It's pulling out all the iron out of their body. And this naturopath you never see curcumin marketed as lower your iron with this. They just say, fix your joints, get your brain health better. Like they don't market it for that because there's multiple mechanisms to everything. So I see shit like that all the time and it drives me nuts. A lot of people that I work with, we just remove their supplements and they're like, oh my God, I feel so much better. I'm like, well, you already paid me, so you might as well keep going with this. You know what I mean? But like just removing the wrong shit. And that's not to say curcumin it's not toxic for somebody. It's the lowering of the iron that's bad for their health. But someone like my wife, she has genetically excess iron absorption. She absorbs extra iron. Her iron's always very high. So curcumin could be perfect for her. So there's not really one good or bad supplement for everybody. It just fucking depends.
Wild. Do you ever have people just restart? You're like, hey, look, we're just going to stop all the supplements and we're just going to refresh. We're just going to start from foundation and work our way back up.
Yeah, that's what I do a lot of the time. And I honestly love when a client comes to me with no supplements at all. And this is going to sound kind of fucked up, but the more fucked up someone's health is, the more I feel like it helped. Because that means if someone's seen all the different doctors and they're still very sick, very depressed or something like that, that signals to me they're probably going to have a lot of check engine light on a lot of these things. And that's what I see a lot of the time. And when I see that, I get happy, not because they're genetically fucked, but because I know how much value I'm going to be able to give them, how much I'm going to be able to help them. Versus the people, I work with some people, they're like, hey, I feel pretty good all the time, but I want to see what's out there. And I can't add, I think I can make anyone feel better, but I can't add nearly as much value as helping someone that's on all these depression meds, but still depressed, get them off their meds, wean them off that in a safe way to minimize withdrawals while giving them the right B vitamins, vitamin D, the right stuff their cells need, and then making them feel that much better. Like they get way more value out of that.
Yeah, the people that are doing usually just fine. You're like, have you gone for a walk?
Yeah,
No? All right,
exactly.
cool. Pay me $200.
The last time you were on our show, you mentioned that the number one pattern you saw for people was a deficiency in vitamin B12, or was it vitamin D? Like now that you've been doing this for like a year or so, like
Well,
what are the patterns you're seeing?
yeah, I definitely see B vitamins. B12 is definitely a big one, but there's different types of B12. So you have cyano B12, which is the synthetic one, which is pretty much garbage. You have methylated B12, which is pre-activated by your body. I have a mutation that makes everyone in the wellness community genetics would say, you have an MTHFR mutation, take a methyl B vitamin. I tried that. I was so fucking anxious all day. Like I'd literally be sitting there in bed just screaming in my head, like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And because of another mutation I have, it makes me get very anxious. So I have to take adenylyl and hydroxyl B12. So two special types. So the pattern is a lot of people need B12. I absorb through the gut very poorly and I transport it through my blood into my cells very poorly, but especially the right type of B12 that's also dictated by genetics. That and vitamin D is huge as well. I don't work with a single person that doesn't have any vitamin D mutations. Now, it could fall on a spectrum. So all of this is. So you can have someone with one mutation in one gene out of like 5 vitamin D genes. You could have someone with like 12 mutations across all those genes. So it's not just if you have one mutation or not. A gene can be mutated in multiple areas. See this fuzz here? It's a fuzz, not a bug, by the way, Dylon.
Okay. No, it was orbs.
Energetic emissions. But vitamin D is a big one as well. And I also think histamine. So everyone thinks of histamine as coughing, sneezing, anaphylaxis. Histamine, I lived my first 25 years of my life, very high histamine. Brain fog, anxiety. Give me an inflammatory condition, histamine's related to it. Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, arthritis, psoriasis, hives, eczema, anxiety, depression. All these things can be linked to high histamine. And I was eating foods I was allergic to every day. I had no idea. Peas and almonds, severely allergic. Ate them every day. I never got a single hive, never got a rash. I would just feel foggy as shit and want to be fucking lazy as hell. And the day I found that out and removed those was the best day I had in years.
Mm. That's wild. And so like you're seeing a lot of the same themes in your clients where you're identifying what their body works best with and what their body's essentially fighting. And you're like, hey, let's take this out. Let's put more of this in. Is that kind of the general premise behind taking the natural approach here? Because earlier you mentioned educated guesses. And I would argue that it sounds like the traditional pharmacology path is an educated guess as well, right? So like, why don't you think more of the systems pointed towards what you're doing?
I just think because it actually requires critical thinking and taking time to figure out what's working for each person. But it's really interesting. You can see people with, and of course too, you can't check every gene too. I do have my workflow of genes that I usually check. And then, my workflow. And if someone has some really unique things, I may dig a little deeper, but you can have people that have very similar mutations. One person has Crohn's disease, the other person has eczema, or they have anxiety. So it's very interesting how very similar mutations can manifest in different organs for different types of people. But at the end of the day, these mutations are present in every single one of your cells. So we don't really know why does inflammation give some people leaky gut and other people anxiety or other people joint pain? We don't exactly know why. But some of the same supplements I use to fix joint pain are the same ones I use to clear up people's skin. People view it as, brain stuff or skin stuff or this or that, anxiety, depression. I view it as just optimizing the cell biology itself. If you give, like you mentioned, take out what's harming the cells, what they can't process well. If they break something down very slowly, like I break down histamine very slow. That's why I was so sensitive to fog from histamine. But that's very common. Like all these mutations I'm mentioning, we're talking like 20, 30, 40, 50% of the population has. We're not talking about like 1% genetically fucked freakazoid type stuff. You know, these are common things. And it depends though. One mutation, 60% of people. How many people have triple mutations on the same gene? That might be somewhat rarer. Either way, we're still not talking about like 1 in a million.
Well, then, and I know you got away from this earlier from what you were doing with your company before, which was, I think, gene treatment for cancer research and stuff like that. It sounds like what you're doing, though, could help resolve a lot of people with that scenario where maybe the chemo treatments aren't helping, but it's helping all these other people. Why wouldn't it be helping this person? Well, it sounds like they have some sort of mutation that's causing the treatment not to work as well. I mean, there's a lot of counters that could go into that, but it definitely sounds like that would be down the path that would help.
No, 1000%. And that's something I'm really excited to do. Like I plan on making a name for myself. I don't know how many years, maybe the next 2 to 4 years in this holistic space. But if you think about it, like these same, like for example, I mentioned vitamin D, I mentioned B12, I mentioned histamine. All of these things are risk factors for cancer. So I do think, like, I don't even know where the line goes with this. Like, I've worked with people with autism or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's using the same workflow I use for someone, someone doesn't have those diseases. Optimizing these same pathways has gotten them significant improvements. Am I saying on the record my natural genetically personalized supplements can cure these diseases? No, not yet, at least. You know, it's still very preliminary, just a couple of people. But I think anecdotes are very important, especially when I have no textbook to go off. I have no protocols. I have none of that. This is all reading, figuring out what I go and going by the part of it's intuition, but it's intuition backed by over a decade of studying this stuff. And the reason why, for example, if people are living with severe vitamin D issues their whole life, that increases the risk for cancer, or all these different mutations that increase, they raise things that lead to cancer. If you gave someone, I think it's safe to say, if you give someone the right supplements now, they'll be happier and healthier now, lower inflammation. And that's undoubtedly going to lower their risk for cancers down the road. Will it eliminate it? No, nothing will eliminate. But what if someone already has cancer and you gave them the right supplements that their cells actually need? Maybe that's why their immune system can't properly recognize the cancer and kill it. So, like, where's the line going to be drawn here? How far can this really go and help with people? I think it can help in all disease states. Now, can these supplements alone reverse late stage, advanced stage chronic diseases? That's where it's, it's very hard to say, but someone with early stage Alzheimer's or ALS or some of these things, the same mutations that made you feel like shit or not optimal health while you were aging, I think those same mechanisms are what led you to get the actual disease in the first place. And I don't think that's a big leap of logic or leap of faith to say that. I just got to be somewhat reserved. I'm very hopeful. Like I said, I want to do a couple of years in this holistic, build my practice, but I do want to loop back around to conventional medicine, work with some more holistically minded oncologists or mental health people or neurologists. And I really think even just you don't got to do this huge deep dive on you can't do this level of scrutiny on everyone. There's not enough resources, at least not right now. I think AI will help a lot with that. But even just a couple little things, 2 to 3 targeted things that they need most, combine that with the therapy, combine that with these other things, combine that with the chemotherapy drugs and see how well that works. It's just tricky though, especially with cancer, because cancer are your cells that got mutated. So if you mutated the cancer cells, what if you give your cells a nutrient they need that also helps the cancer? So that's where, especially with cancer, it's a lot trickier with that. That would require proper clinical trials. And then we're talking, 5-10 years down the road, and then we're blinking just like that, So cancer especially is definitely, I think, the last frontier with this. But you keep the inflammation low. Think about all the Aborigine tribes not eating all the bullshit we eat, exposed to all the stress. There's basically no cancer there. And you really think their genes are that bulletproof? No. Again, our DNA has not changed several 100,000 years. It's how much bullshit are we exposed to on a daily basis? There's glyphosate pesticides in the air we breathe every single breath. There's no getting away from it. Now, if you have mutations and how you process that, that can accumulate over time.
It sounds like what you do could be in almost many of practices. You could be in a ketamine treatment facility.
Yeah.
You can be a PTSD treatment facility, cancer treatment facility, where you're kind of figuring out different parts to be able to help with that. I'm just curious, is why why are you the forefront on this? Like, this is awesome that you're doing that. I'm just curious why more doctors and medical haven't gone down this path to be like, hey, we should really get down to deep, more individual therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I honestly think part of it is just how I view it. I think that's honestly come from a lot of the experiences that I've had with cannabis or psychedelics and thinking about these things. I know that the DNA model for the double helix, the scientist that made that, one of his last talks, he basically, like, he was old. He dropped the mic and was just like, yeah, I was tripping balls on acid when I thought of that. Or even the
Yeah.
PCR machine, the machine they use to like test for COVID and stuff, you use that in lab research. That concept was thought up on an acid trip. So I think a lot of it comes down to just the creative mindset of this and not being afraid. Like, I'm not being like, if I hit a wall and these don't work in certain indications, then so be it. You know, I know it works for a lot of people. And initially I was like, oh, well, if I can't help everyone with everything, it's not worth doing. But then as I work with people and they're like, I know so many friends like me, this could help this and that, hearing that, you know, there's always sometimes people say here and there, oh, I don't really feel much, whatever. But that's the large minority. And then people are saying, this really changed my life. And I really don't know why. I guess people don't think the way I do. I guess it's a hard thing to say, but I think a big part of it comes from being a PhD in the cell biology aspect and pharmacology, because that's literally knowing how do cells function normally, how do cells function when they're diseased, and how do any external factors influence how they behave healthily or in a disease state. So I think part of it's definitely the field that I'm in. Like, my PhD wasn't in genetics. Like, I took a genetics course, but like genetics out of my whole skill set, it's by far the most like self-taught. I mean, that's a good question, honestly. I ask myself that all the time. And a lot of the practitioners I talk to, I do honestly. And a lot of the practitioners I talk to, I tell them this, they're like, you know, 50, 60 years old and practicing for decades. And they're like, oh my God, their jaw drops. And I'm like, it just makes sense to me. Figure out what your cells.
It's almost like they get in a habit.
Yes.
With
common
themselves
sense
and with their research. They're just like, oh, this is right. This is what it is.
Well, it's not even research
You
so
know?
much. Part of it too is nowadays, all the independent, there's no mom and pop. I have my own practice anymore. They're all gobbled up by big hospital chains. And they have to see more patients than ever. I always say, don't hate the player, hate the game. It's the training system that's fucked. Even my PhD training system, 98% of the cool shit I've learned has nothing to do with anything I learned in a course during my PhD. It's pretty much all just applying the basic concepts and just reading, because I walk the walk. Like, I never turn off the scientist. It's pro and cons. You know, sometimes it's like Tyler. I mean, Dylan's been around. Like, Tyler, sometimes like Tyler, like, we don't need to know exactly why this is happening in our brain at this very moment. We're just trying to fucking vibe out, bro. Like, literally, but that's how you get progress and innovation like this. You know, it's definitely, sometimes my wife's like, Tyler, shut the fuck up. You've said the same thing 7 times today. I'm like, well, I don't want to forget it. So it's like, you know, it's pros and cons for sure. But, and I think too that I also acknowledge that there's a limit to it, meaning you can have someone that has really bad mold or gut dysbiosis and all my supplements won't do shit because their gut's so inflamed. I'm not an expert on how to heal that, you know? So there are limitations. I think the future is having a naturopath, having someone like me that's more pharmacology, supplement side, having a psychiatrist, having a nutritionist. The problem is none of this is covered by insurance. So everyone has to pay out of pocket. Imagine if this was covered by insurance and you only had to pay 20% or 30% of the bill out of pocket or something like that. Then it would be accessible to everybody. But I realize now it's not just what works the best. My brain is always focused on what is truly optimal and the best. But a lot of times that's not what's feasible or like feasible. Like, just because I know what works and how to fix everybody, how do I bring that to the masses? Who's going to front the bill? Who's going to pay for it? And that's where I'm trying to realize, oh shit, like it's not just all about having ideas. You need to actually figure out how to implement that at scale.
Well, imagine if, like, you know how they have all these schools and everything, they require you to get all these vaccines. Not saying they're bad, but they require you to get these vaccines going to school. Imagine if part of the process was they had to come see someone like you. They'd be like, hey, we want our students to do a lot better in school. We want them to not have to be sick most of the time. What is it going to help them off? Let's give them one of these genetic tests and see what supplements they should be taking while they're here in order to keep them in the classroom, in order to get through school a lot quicker. It'd be interesting if, like, yeah, sure, if the insurance didn't cover adults, but it went towards kids. Like orthodontia covers mostly kids because that's when you get it the dental work done as a kid anyways. Why not have that work done as a kid, and then you never need it the rest of your life? You have the paperwork and know what it is.
Yeah. And I think part of that too is that would dismantle so much of big pharma sales. Think how much. And I do work with children, and the one thing that drives me fucking nuts are the children being put on the Adderall. Like, it's one thing if you're an adult and you get put on Adderall. I still think that's fucking horrible. I still think 95% of people on have no reason being on it. That being said, I'll be honest, I've used it for study benders, going out here and there. Using it sparingly like that is nothing compared to having your brain adapt to daily use. Adderall feels good. It's a fun fucking drug. I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as you do the dosage appropriately, but it's the daily usage of that. Doing it once a week during a very high work area, like period of your life, or once a month to just learn a whole bunch of shit in one day, like, go for it. But the daily usage, especially when you're a child, is crazy. And I work to get people off of Adderall. People that have been on Adderall for decades or years, they quit. They can't get out of bed. They have to perform day to day. So we get them off of that and get on the right replacement. It would just be taking all the money away from big pharma. And who funded, wasn't it the Rockefellers or some shit that initially funded med schools and decided the curriculum? Like, who's actually deciding what's being taught in these things? Like, yes, logically, it makes so much sense to have this done and figure out what may be going on. I mentioned the histamine. Histamine is a huge driver of ADD, ADHD. I work with a lot of children. All we do is support histamine pathways, watch their histamine intake, clear up any possible gut dysbiosis. They don't need any Adderall. But then the part of the problem is, this is something no one talks about. You have these parents, they're C students now, an A student. They know the drug's not good for their kid. But they want their kid to get straight A's. They want their kid to be successful. So they have to bite that bullet on the time and play dumb and be like, Johnny's doing great. He's only on it for high school. What the fuck do you think is going to happen when you go to college and pull him off that shit?
Mm-hmm. Never even thought about it like that.
It puts them in a very tough situation because no matter who you are, you take Adderall, you're having the best day of your fucking life. Like, there's no way around it. Like whether you're cleaning your room, no matter what you're doing, you fucking love doing it. Because guess what? It raises dopamine in everybody. But like I said, histamine lowers dopamine. I don't think I said this. Histamine in your brain directly lowers the amount of serotonin and dopamine your brain makes. So is it really the dopamine production issue? Just baseline? Oh yeah, slap a Band-Aid. Let's dump a bunch of adrenaline or fix the histamine. But what's going to feel more fun? What's going to be more instant gratification? Taking the fucking pill.
So what do you recommend to people? I personally know people that are on Adderall as adults, and it feels like they took that as an opportunity, like, hey, I'm not as focused as I want to be in my everyday life, and this makes me more focused, makes me more driven, makes me more productive. Like, what would you speak into that person?
Yeah, I mean, it really does work. But again, I think there's a lot more better holistic routes for that. The right type of multivitamin, making sure you're getting all the micronutrients you need. Like, I'm going to be honest, like, I definitely eat, usually in my diet, I eat a good diet, but like, I'm not looking at every little micronutrient, this and that. Like, I still eat the protein bars from Costco. I have at least 2 or 3 of those a day because I'm fucking busy and I don't react poorly to whey protein. Yeah, there's some stevia in it, but like, at the end of the day, it's pros versus cons. For me, I feel well when I eat those. It's quick when I'm working on calls all day. Will I do that forever? No, but you gotta, I think I got off tangent here, but you gotta try to find what your body may be missing. What is causing the brain fog? And it also sucks too, again, when everyone else is on it. Like, I really think if you have someone that does everything right, low inflammation, clear-headed, versus someone that lives a shitty lifestyle that takes Adderall, who's going to get more work done in a day? I think possibly the person taking the Adderall, but that's a crux because that's long-term robbing the BDNF. I talked about this last time on the podcast. That's what psychedelics raise to grow new brain cells. It lets your brain grow and adapt. I have a mutation in BDNF, so my BDNF is normally lower. And that's why I had a lot of anxiety. That's why I respond so well to psychedelics. My BDNF has a long distance. I respond very, very well to that. Adderall tanks your BDNF. So you're trading off this focus for long-term reduced neuroplasticity in your brain that is directly linked to neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's. Now, am I going on the record saying taking your Adderall, little blue pill, 10 milligram once a day will give you Alzheimer's? No, don't take this and run with it, people. But cumulatively, on top of all this other stuff, low vitamin, all these other things, it's not good for your brain. It's not, especially chronically. But at the same point, I acknowledge it's very difficult. When do you have that clean getaway? When can you afford to be a shell of yourself for months while you recover from this? Of course, I'm biased. I would say work with me. We'll reduce the withdrawals. But at the end of the day, I'm just one person. I can't. That's why I want to get more into educational type things. Imagine I launched a course. I don't know, $100, $200 course, and you learn about how Adderall works, what you can do to support yourself, to get off the Adderall safely and effectively, and to help your brain recover after that. Like, I feel like that's the route to help the most people.
That's
I
how
mean,
we
people have
make
to go tell
money.
their boss,
And
though.
you
Yeah, I'm gonna
remember
be-
you were on here first.
Yeah.
2% industry standard. I support you. Go get it, big dog.
How many people are gonna have to tell their boss, like, "Hey, I'm gonna be like shit for the next couple of months. I'm going off of the thing that got me this job." So,
Dude, it's crazy,
Dude,
dude. Like,
shit.
there's like I'm not naming names, but dial on people in undergrad that we knew that took a lot of Adderall with a prescription, more than the recommended dose in order to study. They went to med school, finished med school, and they're not smart enough to be doctors. They literally just take enough Adderall to sit there. What would take someone like me 6 hours to learn? They sit there for 24 hours straight and just memorize, spit it all out, and then they pass. And now they need to take 60 mgs of Adderall every day just to be a doctor. And that's why no one thinks the way I think, because I don't say no one, but you know what I mean? Like, that's feeding into the same thought
Well,
here.
I wonder if that's going into like what same idea of like you're doing this research, right? You're doing it one because you enjoy it, so you don't need to take the Adderall or these supplements in order to learn. Like you said, these people were in undergrad taking it, and then they got to doctorate school, then took more to take it. Really subliminally, where is that memory going to? Is it just going to the frontal lobe where they're just like, I just need it here to pull it out next 24 hours? Or are they actually subconsciously learning everything in order to take care of a patient?
Well, because they're not connecting the
some point-
concepts there, and that's the difference between. Yeah, exactly. That's the difference between just learning and regurgitating versus connecting these things. I think the number one thing, the skill that I had is pattern recognition and like big picture and like seeing how these things may interconnect. And then people ask me how I figure this shit out. I'll literally have an idea and type in like, I don't know, a gene and like BDNF, and boom, studies come up, boom. And then I read up, the hard part is thinking about what 2 or 3 words to Google together. But then I just read it and look at it. And like, you just type in a couple sciencey buzzwords. Oh, this gene affects BDNF. This supplement affects BDNF. Well, that could help someone with low BDNF. Like, you're just connecting those types of patterns there. Obviously, to me, it doesn't seem that hard what I do, but obviously that's because I do it all the fucking time. I eat, sleep, breathe it, but that's just how you get accustomed to these things. But yeah, man, a lot of people nowadays, these people that are becoming doctors the past, I don't know, however many years, it's artificially propping them up to be able to pass these things. Because part of it's because none of it's real, like, concept application. I remember, I think it was molecular biology of the cell. This graduate course I took during my PhD. It was the only course that actually taught you. Like, the tests were like, this is what you saw in the Petri dish. How do you design experiments to figure it out? And like, so many people I think I got like a C or something, and like most people failed it because it was not 4 or 5 multiple choice. 2 are bullshit, and then process of elimination. It was literally write out explain yourself.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
you guys know me, I can never just say a short thing. that's why I need to make a YouTube. I'm clearly a long format type of guy, and explaining my thought process. I'm not regurgitating studies. I'll be talking about something with someone, and literally live time, you'll see it click in my head. I'll make a new correlation and then have a new theory instantly on the fly, and then be able to connect all the supporting information around it on the fly. And when you're talking through that, that's how you could tell if someone knows their shitter versus just saying something short. But yeah, I could go on forever.
Well, I know as related to this plan here, it sounds like you're going to be doing a lot of research and everything. You're probably going to be needing quite a bit of participants to help you with it. Where can people reach you? Where can they be a part of this process that you're doing? Where can they reach you at?
Yeah, so Instagram at Dr. Panzner, Panzner. Same thing for TikTok, Dr. Tyler Panzer on Facebook, and then Dr. No Dot, TylerPanzer.com is my website. Yeah, I just really excited to, again, see where this goes. Like, I think the sky is the limit, but I'm also trying to take it day by day. And, I'm having some more clients that, multiple sclerosis. I'm slowly trying to move more aside from just the typical, I don't know, wellness. I don't feel that great. Let's figure it out. I'm slowly starting to move more into actual clinical diseases. Of course, no one take it or run with it. I'm not saying I cure any of these diseases. I'm just simply giving the cells what they need, getting rid of what they don't need, and letting the body do the rest. So anyone listening, if you're not happy where your current health is at, or more importantly, I think everyone knows someone that's not happy where the current health is at, especially if they're sick of conventional medicine failing them. Please reach out. More than happy to try to help out. I really, truly think this is going to revolutionize not just the health and wellness sector, but the medical sector as well down the road. Or even bare minimum, go follow my page. I'm sure you'll be hearing content you've never heard anywhere else. Give that a share, and algorithm works wonders. And someone that may be really needing that piece of information will see that, and that can change their life.
Definitely. Well, thank you again for coming on, Dr. Panzner. This will be multiple times. You have so much info we want to keep handing out to our listeners. If you love the podcast, make sure to share with those that you love. Share with your friends. Give us a follow. Like the episode. And until next time, everyone.
Thank you for having me on, fellas. Can't wait for the next one.